Nah. All right. So Detroit Future City. Why is this work important? Why is it significant?
It's the 50-year future, right? Less than 1% of Detroiters make over $100,000. The wage gap between Detroit and the rest of the region is $30,000. If you work in Detroit, but you live in the suburbs, you are making as much as $30,000 more than a Detroiter, right? Who works in the suburbs. So I truly believe that this is up to all of us, and that is really the intention of Detroit Future City.
Welcome to the Dripping in Black podcast, where we celebrate Black excellence throughout the Black diaspora. Here's your host, David V. Lewis.
What's up, good people all across the world? This is the Dripping in Black podcast. I am your host, David V. Lewis. And per usual, we have another fantastic guest who represents Black excellence throughout the Black diaspora. Today's guest is Anika Goss.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. I almost went the other way. All right. Anika, say hello to the world.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me, David.
All right. The pleasure is all ours. And so you have quite the story. We're going to dive into what it is that you're doing right now and a little bit about what you've done in the past. But we always like to introduce our guests to our audience, and we ask a very simple but not so simple question of who are they? So who is Anika Goss?
Who is Anika Goss? So I am a mother first, and a sister and a daughter. And but I'm a mom of two now young adults, and I feel like they have really shaped who I am as an adult. And my parents and my family have shaped who I am as a young woman. I'm a third generation Detroiter. My grandmother came to Detroit in 1936, and we grew up. My parents moved around a lot when I was a kid, and we settled in Oakland, California, and lived there until I was in high school, and then moved back here and lived out in the suburbs until I graduated, and then I went to college, and they went back to California. And so I've got very deep roots, family in the Bay, in Oakland, and that feels like home as much as Detroit feels like home. But I've spent my adult life, I've lived now here in Detroit longer than I've lived anywhere else, and have made it home. It's shaped my career, and it's probably the best thing about who I am.
Wow. Okay. You know, I'm a history teacher, so when you said 1936, I said, wow, smack dab in the middle of the Great Depression.
Yeah.
They moved here.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with why they moved?
Yeah. Yep. Yes. My grandfather had passed away, and well, it wouldn't have been my grandfather. My great-grandfather had passed away, and at that point had put all of his children through school, except for the last two. And my grandmother had just finished Alabama Teachers College, which would have been Alabama State, and they lived on a big farm. And when my great-grandfather passed away, my great-grandmother couldn't afford to keep the farm. In a lot of southern towns, this was in Lafayette, Alabama, they couldn't keep the farm. They drove the taxes way up, and they lost the farm, and they had to move to They had to move to the town. And then when my great grandmother passed, the oldest daughter had already moved to Detroit a few years earlier and had married a pastor and was living in the North End and was pretty, considered well off. And she was a nurse and he was a pastor. And so when my great grandmother passed, she moved up the rest of the kids, including my grandmother, who would have been a young woman. She moved everybody up to Detroit. And so they all moved here and started a new life in Detroit.
Yeah. All of that's juicy, interesting to me, but that's not why we had you on the podcast. But as a history teacher, it's so many, additional stories within the context of that my mind is going crazy about. But let's talk about the CEO of Detroit Future City.
Yeah.
Right. What is Detroit Future City?
So Detroit Future City is a nonprofit think and do tank. We're a planning organization and an innovation center. Pre-COVID, we are based, and we still have our offices there, but they're not open, on West Grand Boulevard. We were born out of the original strategic framework process in 2012. That was the largest community planning process in the United States that included over 100,000 people. And so our job is to lead the land use and economic future of Detroit for the next 50 years. It's a big job.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds intimidating.
I don't. I hope it doesn't sound intimidating. I like to think of it as it's everybody's. It's a big city, right? And it's up to all of us to make sure that it's the city that we all want to live in. So I hope the way I made it made it sound like it was intimidating, but I hope that when I say that, the reaction I want is for people to say, yeah, and as a matter of fact, I want you to do something about, and then, dot. That's really what we want people to say at Detroit Future City. We want people to be thinking about that. We want people to be excited about Detroit's future.
Yeah. Okay. It might be more to do with me than it had to do
or
with
me.
you.
I need to work on my elevator speech.
Nah. All right. So Detroit Future City, why is this work important? Why is it significant?
It's the 50-year future, right? So there's 24 square miles of vacant land. The unemployment rate is still entirely too high. It's much higher than it is in comparison to the region. Only 25% of Detroiters are considered middle class. I think we need to really think about what we want Detroit's future to become. And we can only do that if we have a blueprint for for what that should look like moving forward. If we just let market forces take hold, which they will, the market, the corporate sector will just take hold of Detroit where land is cheap, development will come. Unless we have a blueprint where we can be intentional about what our city should look like, then we will have no say and no control about what our future will be in 50 years. So what I hope, we have a long way to go. And part of raising our voice around that is making sure that people are really clear around what the issues are right now and where it is that we need to be. What's the standard for us, right? 1% of Detroiters, less than 1% of Detroiters make over $100,000. The wage gap between Detroit and the rest of the region is $30,000. If you work in Detroit, but you live in the suburbs, you are making as much as $30,000 more than a Detroiter, right? Who works in the suburbs. So I truly believe that this is up to all of us. And that is really the intention of Detroit Future City, that climate change, the reason our neighborhoods are disinvested, where we have large scale blight and open space and land, is intentional. It's been intentional since 1936 when my grandmother moved here. That's when they started building ghettos, right? And they were intended for Black people and brown people to live in those places, for us not to invest in them, for them to be continually contaminated, for us to disinvest in those areas, to have the least for continually, perpetually. And so until we can understand that, we will never move past that. And until we begin to direct resources towards it, we will never see any change.
Yeah. And so I hear a tremendous challenge again. So I'm hearing a tremendous challenge there. You go to the 1930s and you have some of these same issues. And here we are in 2021, knocking on 2022, dating of the recording again. And we still are facing some of those same challenges. So let's talk a little bit about today and some of the challenges you are facing with, I guess, first deciding what comes first, what comes second, what comes third with your planning, and then protecting that.
Yeah, that's a great question, David. We're like in the middle of a strategic, we're not in the middle, we're beginning our strategic planning process now. And we've spent the last 5 years really trying to focus and prioritize, just as you said. So and we'll continue with this as a base. So we've spent the past 5 years going deep in land use and environmental sustainability. So really focusing on blight and vacancy and productive land use and clean water and stormwater management in neighborhoods. We've also gone really, really deep in vacant industrial property. A lot of people don't know that there are 900 industrial properties in Detroit that are standing vacant. 900.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed 900.
Well, you know what? I really kind of think that we get used to living wherever, we drive past, I live on East Jefferson. I drive past the bakery, the old, there's an old bakery on like Jefferson and Cashew. Is it? No, it's not that far down. It's on the east side, right before you get to the, right after the plant, right after the Chrysler plant. It's an abandoned bakery. People don't even realize it's there. You don't even notice it. Drive past it. It's there all the time. I think we're used to it, right? We're used to just living with these industrial sites, and it becomes part of you're just immune to it. You're desensitized to it. But it's a problem. You can't develop it. You can't even develop around it. Like people can't live in that. It's contaminated. It's, kids are walking past it on their way to school. Could you imagine? Like, could you imagine planning that? Like, if you were paying attention to it every day. I don't know if you have children, but I can't imagine it thinking consciously. If I'm living in Birmingham and I'm letting my children walk to school today, right? Like, be careful when you pass that abandoned bakery on the way to elementary school. Can you just, only in Detroit would that have happened, and would we have allowed for that to happen? That bakery is probably sat there for 50 years.
Yeah.
So anyway.
No, that's a great conversation. That's a conversation for another podcast, really, in itself. You got me
Yeah.
thinking about my childhood, and I grew up. There was a I don't know if it was one of the big three or some subsidiary, but there was a factory on the end of the corner on the way to on Outer Drive on the
Yep.
way to my elementary school. And I want to say by the time maybe I got to high school, maybe after high school, they had moved that plant, people out of that plant, it became abandoned. And not
Mm,
before long, in my early 20s, it became debilitated. And
right.
like you said, now you go from me who walked past a thriving, had to make sure I watched cars coming out of the parking lot
Mhm.
on my way to and from school to an abandoned place in that same neighborhood. It just changes the whole neighborhood dynamic. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's like real. I mean, you were dodging cars and that was dangerous. But
Yeah.
imagine you're worried about being snatched into that
Yeah.
abandoned factory, right? Who knows what's
Yeah.
going on
Yeah.
there? Or dogs running
Yeah.
out of there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
before,
So
yeah.
so
So
I'm curious what drew you to this particular kind of work?
yeah. So I've spent my whole career. I like to think of it that I've been lucky, blessed enough to
Mm,
create a career that allows me to move capital and resources to where Black
mm,
people live. That's what
yeah.
I've done my whole career. I've worked in
Yeah.
community development. I started in my 20s, and I'm 50 now, um,
Mm,
where I started working for a national community development financial institution, LISC.
okay.
And I worked in the Detroit office and worked my way up to being a national vice president.
Mhm,
And so, I started off, I mean, I have a social work degree and I thought I was going to be a social worker. And that didn't last very long. I didn't make a very good social worker, but um, the idea that there was all of this money, and if there was a way that Black people could receive in their own neighborhoods, could receive the
Yeah.
same level of attention and attraction and
Yeah.
capital
Mm,
as every other community, imagine what could happen.
yeah.
I really felt called for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think the vast majority of people living in a neighborhood are probably not aware that that work is needed. They're too busy doing their day to day and worrying about life,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so it's important to have somebody sitting at that table with their best interests at heart, right?
I hope so. Like I hope that that's what my work ends up becoming is
Yeah.
it feels that somebody feels like what I'm doing is worthwhile and serving
Yeah.
others in service to others.
Yeah. So let's talk about, and when with Dripping in Black, it's about celebrating who we have on, but also hopefully when younger people watch back, they can be inspired by your story. So
Okay.
knowing what you know now, if you can go back and talk to your 20-year-old self who just got started in this arena,
Hmm.
what's some advice you would give her?
Some advice I would give her.
Mm,
Um, it's funny because 20, 20-year-old me was in college. So
okay.
20 something year old me, I would have said, go and get your PhD while you have the opportunity.
Yeah.
And that is, if I have any regret, it's that, because I was in the University of Michigan program. I had gotten in, I was
Go
accepted.
Blue.
at the time, if you at that, I don't know if they still did this, but if you were already in the master's program and you had a certain grade point average, if you wanted to continue on into the PhD program, you had to write, basically your application was a proposal of what you were going to study. And if it was accepted, you could go on and research that. And I got in, and I hate to even say this on your show, but I did let this white man talk me out of it.
Wow.
He was trying to, he was trying to be helpful. Right. He was trying to be helpful. And, basically told me, I'm this young 22-year-old, that I would be better off as a social worker, that I was needed in the field,
Wow.
as opposed to being a professor.
Yeah.
Well, here I am
Wow.
now running a think tank and partnering with the Brookings Institute and Urban and speaking all over the world. I wish I'd had that PhD. I needed it. I need it,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
don't let
So
anyone
that's
talk you out of your plan.
yeah. And we had a guest on earlier this season, and she had a similar story, but she didn't let them talk her out of it.
Good for
And
her.
I remember that, and how important it is, because it comes across as, it's nice. I'm thinking of you. I'm being considerate of you. It's such a clever way to misguide someone, right? Especially in your youth. And so to be able to know what you're looking for, know what you want, and to say kindly no to that is it's a great advice, right?
Yeah, I think we think that young people don't know anything, and that we have to tell them what their life should
That would
be.
be true. No.
And I'm raising young people
I'm just kidding.
now. I get it. My children are 19 and 22, and most days they don't know anything. But
Right.
I've had to learn raising children at this age, that are raising children in this phase of their young adult life, having to pull back, What are you going to do? What's your plan?
Yeah.
You tell me your plan, and we can talk through how you can get there. It's a very different different way of living. I mean, my parents were the same way. No, you should blah, 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 just like we all were.
Yeah. All right. So did you say Detroit Future City has a 50-year plan?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to say it this way. Let's forecast it 15 years from now. You're 15 years into the 50-year plan. What does it look like? What does the impact of Detroit Future City look like? What's tangible that we can actually see that's happened in the ideal situation?
50 years from now, we would have rapid bus transit along our major thoroughfares, Michigan, Gratiot, Grand River. And you would see it, right? Like you would know it. It's there. These are major thoroughfares. We would also have, instead of the vacant, large scale vacancy that we have right now, those would be extended parks, bioretention swells that manages water, stormwater, rainwater, solar arrays on all of that land, gardens, in the middle of a block where there's only 2 or 3 houses. Those blocks where there's only 2 or 3 houses, there's ribbon farms and stretches of blocks in between those houses. So it looks productive. Even though it's the same land, it still looks productive. There are enclaves of middle-class neighborhoods right?
Yeah.
Enclaves throughout the city. You know, not everybody's going to
Yeah.
be in a middle class neighborhood all the time. I don't expect that,
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
even in 50 years. But
Yeah.
there are many, many neighborhoods that it's clear that this is a place you want to see, that you want to
Yeah.
be. And these people are Black, these people are brown,
Yeah.
these people are Arab, and we're living here in Detroit.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a beautiful picture. And so as Dripping in Black grows its audience and more people get to tune in, I always like to ask our guests, what can the audience tangibly do to help you attain that goal? What is something we could be doing here in the now to support you, not help, to support you in attaining your goals?
Yeah. Um, let's see. I mean, Detroit Future City is a nonprofit, so you could always donate to DetroitFutureCity.com. But I also feel like people should get involved. We have a innovation series that starts tomorrow on the Black middle class in Detroit. Join us for that. Join that conversation. Figure out how this relates to you. And this is a national conversation. We're bringing in folks from Detroit, but also from across the country for cities that are also dealing with increasing Black middle class. I feel like I need to say this, David, because I feel like if there's nothing else you get from me, I want you to know that I truly believe that if we get it right for Black people in Detroit, we are going to get it right all over the country, period. And it'll be Detroit that leads in that.
Yeah. 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 I absolutely believe you as well. And so tangibly, they can support financially. Give that website again.
DetroitFutureCity.com. They can www.detroitfuturecity.com or .org. Either one, it's interchangeable. But join us on our innovation series, all of our programs, all of our research is on there. You can get involved, stay informed, jump in on the conversations. We keep it going.
Yeah. And so if I wanted to do that, I would go to the same website and kind of link up that way. Okay. All right. Excellent. All right. So we're going to close it out, and we always close it out with a major question. All right. Try to close out strong. Are you ready for this final question?
I think so.
All right. Have you ever been on the cover of a magazine?
No.
Okay. Wow. Such a illustrious career that you had. And we just talked about what you're doing for Detroit Future City, but you send us a bio that is as impressive as anything that I've read for a resume, yet no magazine cover though.
Nope.
Okay. Well, one of the things we do here at Dripping in Black is for each and every one of our guests is we place them on the Dripping in Black magazine cover.
Oh,
so my executive producer Sean Smith will show you.
Great, thank you. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. I love it.
Yes, so that will be also a parting gift. We will print it out and laminate it and send it to you at a later date.
Oh.
And also behind me, you see there's some of our guests. We've laminated their covers and placed it on our wall of fame.
Wow. So, that's awesome. Thank you. Yes, I did notice that. And thank you. That's my dad's favorite picture of me. And he recently asked me for it. And I was like, I don't know how to get you that, Dad. So this is great. Thanks.
Oh, we may have to put one in there for Dad then as well. We may have to print out an extra copy for Dad as well. We can definitely make that happen. All right. So we thank you, Miss Anika Goss, for joining us and for all the wonderful work that you're doing and the impact that you're making for the city of Detroit. Thank you again for coming to visit us.
Thank you for having me, David. This has been my treat.
Yeah. And we ask for our audience to hang on. We have one final segment, the last drip, so hang on for that. But thanks again to Anika Goss.
Up next, the last drip.
A Dripping in Black thanks to Anika Goss, and we thank her once more for the tremendous work that she is doing and her commitment to improving the lives of the overlooked and underrepresented in our communities. However, we have reached the final segment of our podcast called The Last Drip. The Last Drip is the last opportunity for us to squeeze in a bit more of Black excellence for you. In this final segment, we highlight a common thread between our guests and our vast and rich African-American history. For this episode, we highlight the life and legacy of a giant in community activism and urban development, Miss Patricia Roberts Harris. Born Patricia Roberts in Mattoon, Illinois on May 31st, 1924, Roberts would attend Illinois public schools in her youth. She would attend college first at the great Howard University on scholarship, where she graduated summa cum laude in 1945. While at Howard, she served as the vice chairman of Howard's college chapter of the NAACP and participated in one of the very first sit-ins at a Washington, D.C. restaurant in 1943. In 1955, she married William Harris, a Howard University law professor. In 1960, she earned her law degree from George Washington University. She graduated number one in her class and was admitted to practice before the U.S. Supreme Court. In 1963, President John F. Kennedy selected Harris to co-chair the National Women's Committee for Civil Rights. Harris was a woman of many firsts. In October 1965, Harris became the first African-American woman U.S. ambassador when President Lyndon Johnson appointed her ambassador to Luxembourg. She was the first Black woman to be dean of a law school when she served briefly in that capacity at Howard in 1969. In 1977, U.S. President Jimmy Carter selected Harris to become Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, better known as HUD, making her the first Black woman to serve in a presidential cabinet. As HUD Secretary, Harris funneled millions of dollars into upgrading neighborhoods. She developed a neighborhood strategy program that subsidized the renovation of apartments in deteriorated areas. She expanded plans and initiatives to lure businesses into blighted areas and paved the way for millions of renovation dollars to be poured into deteriorating housing projects throughout our nation. Harris was appointed to and served in a variety of leadership roles throughout her life before her passing in 1985. In 2000, the United States Postal Service honored her legacy with a stamp bearing her likeness. Because of her tremendous accomplishments throughout her life, as well as her legacy of commitment to improving Black communities across our nation, we honor Patricia Roberts Harris as this episode's last drip. For more on Patricia Roberts Harris, check out womenofthehall.org, mmaahc.si.edu, historicamerica.org, and blackpast.org. My thanks to all of these websites for the knowledge. The story of Patricia Roberts Harris is a tremendous one. And again, in the 5-minute segment of the last drip, there's just much more to uncover. So as always, I encourage our audience to go out to those websites that I mentioned and even Google her, YouTubes and things of that nature to learn more about this stalwart in our history. A friendly reminder that the DIBK Drip Shop is open. Go to dibkdripshop.com to cop the latest Dripping in Black merch. And as always, a huge thanks to all of our listeners, viewers, supporters, and subscribers. We do these episodes for you. A big shout out to the best producer in the podcast game. You know him as Sean Smith, aka S Squared. And until next time, be kind, be loving, and be excellent on purpose. It is a choice.
You have just experienced a Dripping in Black production.